In a cold metal cell, deep inside a galactic council station, a prisoner sat alone. Her name was Varel. But no one called her that anymore. She was simply known as the Asset or Subject 73. The lights above flickered as the air hummed. With the quiet buzz of machines, she didn't move, didn't speak, and didn't look up when the guards passed her door. She had been locked up for over a year. No visitors, no trial, no freedom. She had once been a warrior from a powerful alien race, trained for battle, fast and deadly. But during the war, something went wrong. She saw something maybe too much and broke protocol. She disobeyed a direct order to save civilians. Her own commanders called her defective, dangerous. They left her behind during a mission, assuming she'd die. But she didn't die. She survived. And when she returned, they locked her away like a broken machine. Most days, she sat quietly, eyes closed, breathing slow. But her mind was not at rest. She remembered flashes, fire, screams, betrayal. The past haunted her like shadows that never left. Then, one day, the door opened, not for food, not for guards, but for someone new, a human. He looked ordinary, tall, calm, with kind eyes and a quiet way of standing. He wore no armor, no weapon, just a gray jacket and a tablet in his hand. His name was Elias Stone. She looked at him briefly, then back down. Humans were strange, always involved in conflicts they didn't start. Yet somehow, they survived. They adapted. Elias sat down across from her, just outside the energy barrier. He said nothing at first, only tapped a few things on his tablet. Then he spoke in a soft voice. "You were a hero, weren't you?" Varel didn't reply. No one had called her that in a long time. "They say you saved people against orders," Elias continued. "They also say you lost control." Still, she was silent. Elias leaned back and folded his arms. "I don't believe everything I'm told," he said. "I asked to meet you. That made her look up. "Why?" she asked, voice rough from months of silence. "Because I think you're not broken," he said, "just left behind." The words hit her harder than she expected. She narrowed her eyes. "What do you want?" Elias smiled gently. "I'm not a soldier. I'm a civilian consultant," he explained. "I study trauma, recovery, behavior, but I'm also a citizen of Earth, and we still believe in second chances." Varel laughed once, bitter and sharp. "There is no second chance for people like me." "Then let's make one," Elias said simply. He stood up and turned off his tablet. Then, slowly, he reached out his hand through the energy field. It buzzed softly as it adjusted for human skin. Varel stared at his hand. No one had offered her anything in months, not even kindness. Now here was a human, offering her freedom. Or at least, something close. "You're insane," she muttered. "Probably," Elias said, smiling again. "But sometimes, that's what it takes." She didn't take his hand, not yet, but she didn't look away either. That night, in her cell, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the hand. About the man who didn't look at her with fear or pity. He had looked at her like she was. Real, not a weapon, not a failure. The next day, the guards returned. They took her out of the cell for the first time in 412 days. She didn't fight, didn't resist. She just walked silently between them, her hands bound in magnetic cuffs. At the end of the hallway, Elias was waiting. He gave her a nod, nothing dramatic. Just a quiet gesture that said, "You're not alone anymore." They boarded a small ship. Leaving the station behind, the stars stretched out around them, endless and silent. She sat in the co-pilot seat, still unsure if she should speak. Elias didn't rush her, didn't push her. He just flew the ship, calm and steady. Finally, she asked, "Why me?" "Because no one else did," he said. Silence fell again. But it was a different kind of silence, not cold or empty. It was peaceful, safe, and for the first time in a long time. Varel didn't feel like a prisoner. She felt like something was beginning. Something human. The sky on Earth was different. The clouds moved like slow animals, soft and harmless. The air had weight, warmth, and something else Varel couldn't name. She stepped off the ship and looked around. No weapons, no guards, no control. Towers, just trees, birds, and silence. Elias's home was small, made of wood and glass. Tucked between tall green pines, it was nothing like the sterile halls of the council station. To Varel, it felt unreal, almost like a dream he gave her. Space didn't ask questions. He showed her the kitchen, the small library, and the guest room where she would stay. It had a window facing the forest. And when the wind blew, the leaves danced. "You can stay as long as you want," Elias said. No pressure. Varel didn't know what to say. She had never been given options, only orders. Now, someone had offered her freedom, and she didn't know how to hold it. She stayed quiet for the first few days. She ate in silence, watched the rain. At night, she stood by the window and stared at the stars. She wondered if her old commanders still watched the skies for her signal, or if they had truly erased her. Name, Elias was always nearby. He worked in his small study, drank too much coffee, and listened to old Earth music. Sometimes he would play soft jazz while he typed on his device. Sometimes he would just sit outside and talk to the birds. "You don't talk much," he said one morning as they sat on the porch. She shrugged. "Talking hasn't helped me before." Elias nodded, as if he understood. He handed her a bookend Earth novel. "Old and worn. Try reading," he said. The author was damaged too, but still wrote beautiful things. She didn't open the book right away, but later, in her room, she flipped through its pages. The words were strange at first. Soft, emotional, full of metaphors, but something about them made her chest tighten, made her feel not alone. On the 5th night, she had a nightmare. Her past came alive, fire, shouting, betrayal, and the cold sound of her commander's voice saying, "She is no longer fit for duty." She woke up gasping. Her hands clenched like claws. She thought she had screamed, but no sound had left her lips. She stepped out of her room into the hallway, her feet cold against the wood. Elias was already there, sitting by the window, watching the night sky. "You heard me," she said. Voice low. "No," he replied gently, "but I knew you would have nightmares eventually." She sat down near him, not too close. She still didn't trust herself. "Do you think I'm broken?" she asked. He looked at her, serious now. "No," he said. "I think you were hurt, then thrown away. Like too many others." Varel didn't reply, but something in her expression changed. She wasn't used to being believed, not by anyone. The next morning, she cooked breakfast for the first time. It was simple eggs, bread, some alien root vegetables she had seen in the garden. Elias blinked in surprise when he saw the food. "You cook. I watched you," she said, avoiding his eyes. "Also, your method is inefficient." He laughed, the sound full and real. "Fair enough," he said. "Efficiency is overrated." Days passed, and slowly, she began to speak more. Not about the past, she still locked that away, about small things. Books, the names of trees, the strange behavior of Earth's animals. She sat with Elias during sunsets and told him about colors on her homeworld, how the oceans there glowed at night, how silence was a form of greeting among her kind, and slowly, Elias told her things too, how he once lost a brother in the war, how he left the military to study healing instead of fighting, how he believed in fixing what others gave up on. "You're not the first broken thing I brought home," he joked, once pointing to a 3-legged cat sleeping near the fire. The cat purred louder, almost as if it understood. Varel almost smiled. But peace never lasted long. Not for her. One evening, she found a device behind the house, half buried in dirt, blinking red. It wasn't human tech, it was a surveillance pod from her people. Someone had found her. She didn't tell Elias. Not yet. She needed to think. That night, she sat at her window again. Holding the book he gave her, the forest outside was quiet. Too quiet then. For the first time, she whispered to the stars, "I don't want to go back." And in the room next door, Elias quietly opened his eyes. He had heard her. The forest air was colder now. Autumn had started creeping in, leaving golden leaves scattered across the ground. Varel stood outside at dawn, barefoot, breathing in the quiet, but her mind was loud. The surveillance pod she found 3 nights ago still blinked quietly in a drawer under her bed. She hadn't told Elias yet. She wasn't sure why. Maybe fear, maybe shame. Maybe because she didn't want him to look at her differently. Every night since she found it, she had the same dream. She was back on that burning planet, her team screaming, her hands covered in ash. She remembered the command in her earpiece. Leave the civilians. Complete the strike. She remembered saying no. She remembered being left behind. Now, in this peaceful forest house, those memories came like whispers in the trees. And something told her this peace was running out. That morning, she walked into Elias's study. Holding the pod in her hand, "I found this," she said quietly. Elias looked up from his screen, his face serious. He took the pod carefully, examined it, then placed it on the table. "That's not Earth tech," he said. "It's from my people," she said. "They know I'm alive." Elias leaned back in his chair. "Then we should assume they're watching," he said calmly. "You're not surprised?" She said, studying him. "No," Elias replied. "I figured the day you stepped off that ship, you didn't come alone." Varel tilted her head, confused. "You still let me stay." "I told you," Elias said. "You're not the problem." His trust shook her more than the surveillance pod did. She wasn't used to it. Trust was a luxury, and she didn't know how to wear it yet. That evening, she went into the forest alone. She needed quiet to think. She carried a small tool with her, something she had built in secret from spare parts. It looked like a communicator, but it was more than that. It was a signal tracer. She sat by a moss-covered rock and activated it. A blue light blinked once, then again, faster. There was another signal, not far from here. Buried in the soil near the stream, another pod. She dug it out, her hands covered in dirt and old leaves. It wasn't alone. There were 3 more just like it, all placed in a circle, watching the house from different angles. This wasn't casual observation. It was tracking, targeting. She returned to the house. Silent, tense. Elias was making tea when she entered. "You're being hunted," she said. Flatly, dropping the pods onto the table, he looked at them. Then at her. "And you?" he asked. "What are you going to do about it?" She paused. "Fight," she said. "I always fight." Elias nodded slowly. "Then teach me," he said. She blinked, confused. "Teach you? You know how to survive." He said, "I need to learn for the next 3 days." The house changed. It became a training ground. Varel taught Elias how to move silently, how to track, how to defend. She set traps in the forest, memorized exits, mapped the terrain. Elias wasn't fast, but he was smart, and he never gave up. They trained by day and read by night. In between, Varel remembered more memories she had buried, now rising like ghosts. She remembered a young girl on a ruined colony world. The girl had looked up at her, crying, and Varel had carried her on her back across a battlefield. That girl had died minutes later from a wound Varel hadn't seen. "I never forgave myself," she told Elias one night. Staring into the fire, "I tried to be perfect, to erase every mistake." Elias poured tea into a mug and handed it to her. "Perfection is just another cage," he said. That night, someone triggered a trap in the forest. Varel woke instantly. Silent as a shadow, she and Elias moved through the dark trees, weapons ready. They found the intruder near the stream, a scout, same race as Varel, wearing the insignia of her old unit. He was wounded by the trap and tried to crawl away, but Varel stood over him. "You," the scout said, blood on his lips, "you should be dead." She said nothing, just looked into his eyes. "You don't belong here," he hissed. "You." "Our property." Varel knelt beside him, her voice low and cold. "Not anymore." They took him to the edge of the woods and left him there. Unconscious, Elias watched her closely. "Are you ready to tell me everything now?" he asked. Varel nodded. "Yes," she said. "It's time you knew who I really am." And as the first light of morning touched the trees, she began to speak. The forest was no longer quiet. Birdsong had faded, and even the wind felt nervous. Varel stood on the porch with her eyes fixed on the trees. She could feel the change in the air. Something was coming since the scout incident. She had barely slept. The man she left unconscious hadn't stayed where she left him. The council would know by now that she was alive, alert, and not alone inside the house. Elias packed supplies, medical kits, spare batteries, a loaded stun rifle. He moved with care, but there was tension in every step. "You don't have to." "Stay," Varel said quietly from the doorway. Elias looked at her, no fear in his face, only certainty. "I told you before," he said. "I don't run." She turned back to the woods. "You should," she whispered, too soft for him too. Here, later that evening, the sky turned red as the sun fell behind the trees. Varel crouched near the boundary, watching. She wore armor now, old and scratched. Pieces she had salvaged and repaired. She looked like the soldier she once was, sharp, quiet, unreadable. Suddenly, she heard it, a soft hum in the air, barely noticeable, but not natural. She held up a hand, and Elias froze behind her. Then she saw it. A small black drone zipped between trees, scanning in silent circles. It hovered, moved, and paused above the house before flying deeper into the forest. "They're mapping us," Varel said, her voice tight. She picked up a small blaster and handed a second to Elias. "They'll come at night when shadows cover the approach." Elias took the weapon, his grip unsure but steady. "I'm ready," he said. "You're not," Varel replied, "but that doesn't matter anymore." They set traps again, more advanced ones this time. Wire snares, sonic alarms, and old EMP bursts Varel had built from scavenged parts. The forest around them became a maze of quiet defenses. At midnight it began. The first sign was light. Faint blue beams cutting through the trees like knives. Then came the figures, tall, armored, moving without sound. There were 6 of them, each one trained, fast, and well-equipped. They weren't here to talk. They were here to take Varel back, her end to her. She waited until they stepped into her trap zone. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she triggered the first sonic pulse. 2 of the soldiers dropped to their knees, hands covering their helmets. Elias fired a stun blast from the window, hitting one directly in the chest. The others opened fire, their weapons making no sound, just white flashes of light. The porch exploded behind Varel as she rolled into cover. Returning fire with calm precision, Elias ducked under the window, panting. "Tell me this isn't the worst idea I've ever had," he muttered. "It is," Varel called back, "but you're surviving, so I won't insult you yet." She moved through the forest like a ghost, using the trees for cover. 2 more soldiers chased her fast, accurate, but not prepared for her style. She lured them toward the stream, where the second EMP trap waited, with a sharp click. The blast went off, disabling their weapons and knocking them flat. One tried to rise, and she knocked him out cold with the back of her blaster. Only one was. Left now, she returned to the house and found Elias backing up slowly. The last soldier moving toward him with a shock staff. Elias fired once, missed, and the staff came swinging toward his head. Then Varel was there. She slammed into the attacker, tackling them into the dirt. They rolled, kicked, and punched. The fight close and brutal. She was faster, but the soldier was stronger. Trained in disabling her kind, he pinned her down, pressing the staff to her throat. Then his mask-cracked Varel had struck a weak point, and she saw his face. It wasn't a stranger. It was Commander Derrick's, the same officer who had left her behind during the war. "You!" she hissed, rage and disbelief mixing in her voice. He smiled, cruel and cold. "You should have stayed dead," he said. "You were made to obey, not survive." With a roar, Varel twisted, using a hidden blade from her wrist guard. She stabbed it into the ground, just enough force to unbalance him. Then she struck his throat, hard, and he collapsed. Unconscious, she stood over him. Breathing heavy, blood trickling from her lip, Elias limped over, looking at the man on the ground. "Who is he?" "My old commander," she said darkly. "The one who erased me." They dragged him inside, bound him, and sat in silence for a long moment. Elias finally spoke. "What now?" Varel looked out at the forest, still glowing with faint smoke and sparks. "Now," she said, "we make them." Afraid, the fire crackled low in the fireplace. The Commander Derrick sat tied to a chair in the center of Elias's living room. His helmet was gone, his armor damaged, but his eyes still burned with cold pride. Varel stood across from him, arms crossed, watching him in silence. Elias leaned against the wall nearby, a medical wrap around his arm still bruised from the fight. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Derrick broke the silence. "You always were a mistake," he said. "We should have destroyed you the day you hesitated." Varel stepped forward slowly. "Tell the truth," she said. "You didn't leave me behind because I failed." "The mission?" Derrick chuckled. "No," he admitted. "You were never meant to survive that mission at all." Elias's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean by that?" Derrick looked at him, then back at Varel. "She was part of a classified program, Project Requiem," he said. "An experiment to create hybrid soldiers with no moral hesitation. No fear, no guilt. She was one of the first success cases." He continued, "Stronger reflexes, enhanced learning, embedded memory controls." Varel's jaw clenched. "You modified my mind," she said quietly. "You erased pieces of me." "You were never supposed to remember," Derrick replied. "You weren't supposed to feel. Just obey." Elias looked at Varel, shocked but calm. "How much of your past is real?" he asked softly. Varel turned away, walking to the window. "I don't know anymore," she said, "but I know what I've become without them." Elias stepped forward. "Do you believe he's telling the truth?" She nodded. Slowly, "Some of it, yes," she said. "The rest? I can feel it in the cracks of my memories." Outside, rain began to fall, slow and steady. Each drop hit the glass like a tiny echo of the storm building inside her mind. She turned back to Derrick's. "Why now?" she asked. "Why track me down?" "After all this time, because the program is restarting," he said. "Your survival gave them fear, but your skills gave them hope. They want you back to finish the design." Elias stepped closer. "Then we go to them first," he said. "Expose the program, shut it down." Derrick laughed again. "You think the council will let you just walk in and reveal secrets?" He said. "This goes deeper than one war, one species, one girl." Varel didn't blink. "I'm not just one girl," she said. "I'm the proof they tried to bury later that night." They locked Derrick in the basement, tied and sedated. Elias pulled out an old data reader, something he hadn't used in years. "If we're going to find Project Requiem, we need a location," he said, somewhere remote, unregistered. Varel tapped the edge of the table, her eyes distant. "There's a place," she said slowly. "Not a name, just a feeling." Elias looked at her. "Show me." She sat down and closed her eyes, focusing on the fragmented images in her mind. Steel corridors, cold floors, a red light blinking above every door. Children crying behind walls, voices saying numbers instead of names. A mountain range, snow, wind, and an old tower with no windows. She opened her eyes. "I know where to go." By morning, they were packed. Elias reprogrammed a small scout ship to avoid council censors. Varel didn't bring much, just armor, weapons, and a small picture Elias had given her. It was a sketch of Earth's forest, drawn in his hand. She didn't know why she kept it, but she did. As they prepared to leave, Elias paused at the ship's ramp. "You don't have to do this," he said. "We can disappear." Varel looked at him. Her voice calm and certain. "If I run, they'll find others like me," she said. "And they'll break them before they ever get a chance to heal." He nodded. "No more arguments, then let's burn it down." He said they launched at sunrise, flying low across clouds and mountains. Varel sat in silence, her fingers curled tightly around the armrest. "You okay?" Elias asked quietly. "I'm angry," she replied, "but I'm ready," as they flew toward the hidden facility. Varel felt a storm rising inside her, not the fear of the past, but the strength of someone who had faced death. Memory loss, betrayal, and still chose to fight. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every broken thing they tried to throw away, and it was time they all came back. The sky above the mountains was a flat sheet of gray. Snow fell gently, hiding the sharp edges of the cliffs and the old stone roads that led to nowhere. But Varel remembered this place, not as it was but as it used to be. Filled with red lights, cold walls, and quiet screams, the ship landed silently behind a ridge, its engines humming low. Elias powered it down and turned to her. "You're sure this is the place?" Varel nodded, staring at the narrow tower ahead. It looked abandoned, half buried in snow, but she could feel something beneath it. Deep under the surface, something alive. "This is where they made me," she said quietly. "Where they made all of us." They moved carefully through the snow, Varel leading Elias close behind. The cold bit at their skin, but neither complained. This was no longer just a mission. This was a return to fire. Varel found a hidden panel near the tower's base. She wiped snow from it and pressed her hand against the metal. For a second, nothing happened. Then a click, a buzz, and the ground beneath them began to tremble. A staircase opened, leading down into darkness. They entered the facility with weapons ready. The lights inside flickered weakly, casting shadows on the steel walls. Everything smelled of dust, electricity, and old fear. Elias whispered, "Feels like a grave." "It was," Varel replied. But some things here never died as they moved deeper. They passed rooms filled with broken machines, training halls, empty cells. Data screens still blinking with unread reports. Each step brought Varel closer to the past she had buried. Each hallway looked like a memory she had tried to forget. Then they heard it, a voice, faint, mechanical, looping over a speaker, "Test subjects 12, 17, and 34 remain in assigned quarters. Behavioral adjustment cycle begins in 6 minutes." Varel stopped cold. "That's a live system," she said. "That means someone's still here." They followed the sound until they reached a heavy door with a digital lock. Varel sliced into it with an old code buried deep in her memory. The door opened with a hiss, and what they saw inside made Elias freeze. There were children, not babies but not grown either. 5 of them, maybe 6. Each one lying in narrow beds, tubes in their arms, lights above their heads, and soft humming machines keeping them asleep. Varel stepped forward, her voice shaking. "They're still running the program," she said. Just younger this time. Elias moved quickly, checking vitals, turning off sedation systems. These kids have been here for months, maybe years, he said. They've been altered. But not finished. Varel stood beside one of the beds, looking down at a girl with pale skin and silver eyes. She didn't look different from how Varel once was. I thought I was the only one, Varel whispered, but I was just the first. Alarms suddenly blared, red lights flashing through the hallway. Security drones activated, hovering fast toward the room, weapons charged. They found us, Elias said, raising his blaster. Varel grabbed a shock baton from the wall. Her old instincts returning, we hold them off here, she said. The kids come first. The hallway exploded in noise drones firing, walls sparking, echoes of combat bouncing off steel. Varel moved like lightning, slamming one drone into the ceiling. Spinning into another, Elias covered her back, shooting carefully, never missing a shot. But there were too many. Varel was strong, but even she couldn't fight forever. A drone caught her shoulder, burning into her armor, and she staggered. Go, she shouted to Elias. Take the kids and go. He shook his head. Not without you. A flash of movement, one of the children had woken up. Eyes wide with fear, Elias reached her and pulled her into cover. The girl stared at Varel and whispered, Are you the one they warned us about? Varel paused. What did they tell you? That you broke, the girl said. That you ran away. Varel crouched down and looked her in the eye. They lied, she said. I didn't run. I survived, and now, so will you. Varel hit the emergency override panel, activating the lockdown escape tunnel under the floor. A path opened to the surface, narrow but secure. Elias began guiding the kids through. One by one, while Varel held the line, she fought like a storm, moving with rage and purpose. One last drone aimed straight at her heart, but before it could fire, Elias returned and tackled it to the ground, crushing it under his weight. Both of them collapsed, gasping, bleeding, but alive as the silence returned. Varel sat down beside Elias. The children stood in the tunnel, looking back at her with wide eyes. Come on, Elias said, smiling weakly. We're not finished yet. Varel nodded, pulling herself up. No, she said. Now we begin. The snow had stopped falling by the time they reached the ridge. The wind was quiet now, as if the mountain itself had paused to listen. Varel stood at the top, looking back at the narrow tower buried in the cliffs. The place where it all began. The children stood close to Elias, wrapped in thermal blankets. Silent, tired, but safe. They had made it out. They had survived. The council wouldn't be able to hide this for long. Not now. Elias had taken proof data files from the lab. Records of experiments, security footage, and one final piece. Her birth file. It listed her as a number, not a name, not a person. Just a line in a cold system, Subject O, one primary prototype. Hybrid combat asset. Status, defective. She looked at the file, then threw it into the wind. I'm not your weapon anymore, she whispered, watching the paper float away. They took the children to a hidden shelter in the forest valleys below. It was an old rebel outpost from the last border war, forgotten by most. But still warm, still safe. Volunteers, medics, teachers, scientists. Even a few old soldiers who had left the council behind. No one asked what the kids were. They just saw them as what they were now, survivors. For a few days, peace returned. Varel stayed close, but didn't speak much. She watched the kids play with wooden blocks, chase each other through trees, smile with their whole faces. She had never smiled like that when she was their age. She didn't even remember her age. Elias found her sitting alone by a fire one night, sharpening the edge of a broken blade. You still thinking about going back, he asked. She didn't look up. I need to, she said. If I disappear again, they'll keep hunting. We've already exposed the program. Elias said, the files are out. The press is running it across 5 planets. The council will be under investigation within days. She nodded slowly, but her voice didn't change. They'll try to clean house, she said, erase every piece of it. Including me. Elias sat beside her, wrapping a blanket over his shoulders. Then don't be a shadow, he said. Be something they can't erase. Varel looked into the fire, remembering the cell, the silence, the face of that little girl in the lab. Do you think I can be more than what they made me? She asked. Elias smiled. Soft and certain. You already are, he said. The next morning, she made her decision, not in words, but in actions. She stood before the children, now fully awake and aware, and removed her armor piece by piece. She laid it down on the ground in front of them. I was made to fight, she said, but now I choose to protect. She stepped back. Letting her words sink in, from that moment, things began to change. She started helping at the shelter, training the older kids how to use their strength safely, teaching the younger ones how to breathe through fear. She didn't tell them who to buy. We reminded them that they had a choice, and slowly they began to believe it. Months passed, the council launched a public inquiry, and their leaders stumbled through half-truths and denials. But it wasn't enough to bury the story anymore. Other survivors stepped forward, all their subjects. Lost soldiers, silent voices who had waited years to be heard. Together, they became something stronger than any system, a movement. One evening, Elias found Varel sitting outside again. This time, not in silence but sketching. She was drawing the forest, the hills, the faces of the children playing nearby. Didn't know you were an artist, he said. I wasn't, she replied, but then someone told me I was worth saving. He smiled, sitting beside her. So, what now, he asked. No more missions, no more battles. She looked out over the valley, her eyes soft but clear. No more running. She said, I've spent too long trying to prove I wasn't broken, but now I'll show them what healing looks like. She paused, then added, They made me into a weapon, but I made myself into a person. A child ran up to her, laughing, and handed her a flower picked from the edge of the woods. She took it gently, tucking it into her sketchbook. No one had wanted her, too damaged, too difficult, too different, until a human held out his hand, and instead of taking it to rise as a soldier, she took it and rose as something entirely new.